Hello again, everybody. This is Stan Scott with Foggy Bottom Line Media.
This is Scott Konopasek.
And we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of things today. We're going to start with a discussion of some immigration issues we're seeing, the way ICE is doing this work. But then we're going to go a little bit lighter and talk about football for a few minutes here at the end. So stay tuned all the way to the end if you want to hear our thoughts on Lane Kiffin and what's going on in college football. But right now, I want you to subscribe, hit that subscribe button, put a comment in there, hit like if you like what we're doing, dislike if you don't like what we're doing. We want the feedback. But the main thing is subscribe. That's one of the things that helps us keep the lights on here. So that's very helpful for us. If you do that, it doesn't cost anything. And it just makes sure you get alerts when new content comes out. So please hit that subscribe button. So Scott, I was looking at some videos and looking at a new ProPublica report, and it looks like there's a couple of things happening that we might want to discuss here. One is that the other day, ICE agents and federal agents actually pulled people out of the line who were just about to go take their citizenship oath, right? So these people completed the entire process. They get to the courthouse ready to stand there and become American citizens, and they're pulled out of line because of where they come from, because of the country they came from, which is that's interesting. The other thing that's interesting that I'd like to touch on while we're at it is this ProPublica report that just came out, noting that 170 American citizens have been detained by ICE. Right? That is, American citizens are being detained sometimes for days by these federal agents who are ostensibly out looking for illegal immigrants and criminal illegal immigrants. Right. At least that's what they're saying. What's your take on some of this?
Well, coming to the naturalization question, I personally find that very, very disturbing because we've talked for years about, as we talked about immigration, that there's a right way of doing it and there's a wrong way of doing it. And that has kind of been the basis of the enforcement processes that we've done here in the United States, whether you agree with specific enforcement tactics or not. But the idea that someone can do everything that they're asked to do and go through the process and spend years doing it, and then at the last second, without any justification, or explanation, be yanked out of the line. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't make sense. And it seems intentionally cruel. And I'm not sure what the point is behind it. You know, as an election official, we used to celebrate naturalization events. We would always show up to them and celebrate with these people who are becoming citizens, who spent so much time and effort to take this big step and make this big commitment. And we were there and we registered them to vote, and we gave them all these rah-rah speeches about their obligations and responsibility as a voter. And we made a big deal out of it. And they were often there with family members who were not citizens, who were somewhere in that process themselves. And this event, if true, just really undermines the whole celebratory, proud, patriotic moment that naturalization ceremonies have historically been here in the United States, both for those who are becoming naturalized and their families, but also for us who are Americans and who are welcoming and excited to bring others into our fold. So, you know, that it struck me a little bit personally when I heard the story of people being pulled out of line.
Well, I think the justification event was the basically assassination or the shooting of the two National Guardsmen in D.C. by the Afghan immigrant a couple weeks ago. And this Afghan immigrant, if those of you who do not know, this guy was working with American troops in Afghanistan while we were deployed there. He was a translator, did some other things. He did some intelligence work. So he was basically an undercover guy for American soldiers in Afghanistan. He was one of the folks that we brought back, understanding that he was likely to face repercussions for that if he stayed there. Now, this happened when Biden pulled us all out of there under the Trump agreement that he made with the Taliban. And he was vetted. This guy was vetted, and then his immigration status was approved. His asylum was approved by the Trump administration. So I think the point that kind of helps to make is that these folks have been through a long process, and they've been vetted. They've gone through the background checks. They've done the training they have to do, right? But they were pulled out because they come from certain places. And I think it has less to do with whether there are terrorists there or whether people from these particular places might be in some sense particularly dangerous, or, spies or insurgents or something like that.
Yeah.
But these are the people that the Trump administration wants to demonize for one reason. And one of those groups is the Somalis, who have basically become politically important in Minnesota because they've got a big community there.
Right.
So they're attacking a voting constituency, right?
Right. And what all these groups on this list, I read the list of countries, what they all have in common is non-Christian religious traditions and
Yes.
non-European ancestry and ethnicity and language groupings. But, think back when we were in basic training and you had this one goof off in your platoon that would always screw up and piss off the drill sergeant. And what would the drill sergeant do? He would instantly go to collective punishment mode.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
This guy effed up, so now all of you get down and give me 50 push-ups. Or, we're canceling your leave this weekend because this guy, didn't clean the toilets very well when he was on latrine duty. So I developed an aversion to collective punishment directly related to my experiences as a young troop going through basic training. Why should I be punished for somebody else screwing up? And it was just
honestly, in the basic training, I didn't mean to interrupt, but in the basic training content, that makes a certain kind of sense because it's a very small group. There's a lot of peer pressure. And the idea is that this guy's fellow soldiers or girls, fellow soldiers, will help them understand the facts of life, and they got to straighten up and fly right? But that doesn't work when you're talking about everyone who's from Somalia.
Right. So that's the rationalization for it, and there's some legitimacy to that, but also it's a shortcut. It's lazy.
Totally.
It's crude. It's a cudgel. It doesn't specifically address the issue at hand. It's just striking out in anger or frustration at a whole population of people who may or may not, likely did not have anything to do with the behavior of the one person who triggered the collective punishment response.
And this is, go ahead.
It feels like that this is what the administration is doing is they have a pretext now. So they're going to collectively punish everybody, not just those who aren't yet in the country, who want to come to the country that are from these countries, but even those that are here. And the next thing, and we've already heard some discussion about it, is denaturalization, taking away citizenship from people who are from Afghanistan or from Somalia or from some other country, Togo, or some other place that all of a sudden we feel like need to be collectively punished. So I think it's really concerning in terms of this being the practice and not a one-off. But
and I don't imagine it's going to be a one-off. I mean, and if you think about it, this stuff, this kind of collective punishment on an entire group or nation of people or category of religious people is coming from the same people who complain that every white person is being blamed for slavery when they didn't have anything to do with it. Right now, nobody's blaming you or me for slavery. We just want it. We just want it to be recognized that this is something that kept this group of people behind for a century, and we need to think about what we can do to sort of help them catch up a little bit. But
Right.
it's not about blaming anyone, but this could take us down a pretty deep rabbit hole here, Scott, because what this looks to me like is a project to basically turn the United States into a white Christian ethno state, because they're trying to get rid of anyone who's not a Christian. They're trying to get rid of anyone who's not white, right, or passes for white
Right.
at least. Okay, and they're happy to take Swedes and Norwegians, but they don't want anyone from South America or from the Middle East. And the ICE stuff it's basically intimidating people to make this a less sort of attractive place to immigrate to,
Right.
right?
Right. And I think you're
So,
saying you're saying out loud what the end goal is.
right,
Uh, and those who are engaged in this are not inclined to be so straightforward about it. But it harkens back to the 1930s, when whole groups of people were targeted, whether they were gay, Catholic,
right.
gypsies, Jews. The whole categories of people were rounded up and treated very, very badly. Uh, and it, I see some shadows of that. I hate making references back to Hitler and Nazi Germany, because it all seems trite to do, and it's really easy for the right to dismiss that. But there are some real similarities, and the other thing is kind of related as well uh, to the 1930s is, where the hell do all these people come from that are willing to do these things
Right.
and even think them up? I mean,
Yeah.
who who thinks up all these mean, harsh, cruel, brutal uh, tactics
I,
for enforcing policy? I know we want
I
to talk
think
a
his
little
name
bit
is
about
Stephen Miller.
non-citizens being, or citizens being detained, and the violence and brutality and cruelty that sometimes goes into, or has been reported to accompany ICE uh, enforcement actions. But where the hell do these people come from, and how did they get so many willing to do this stuff? That's the part that really concerns me and really puzzles me.
Well, those of you who know me well, if you're watching and you know me fairly well, you know that I used to be that guy who would go to Tea Party meetings, basically just to listen to them and see what they're saying. And today, as part of this project, I do a lot of research on the right wing sort of social media sphere. Okay,
Mhm.
so right wing podcasters. And there's a couple I could name. Aaron McIntyre is one of them. I did a little short thing yesterday. So take a look at that. It's about gambling and healthcare. That's on YouTube now. So take a look at that one and tell me what you think about that one. But one of the things these guys stress, Scott, that they stress it strongly, is this idea of the United States as a Christian nation and wanting it to be white. You see a lot of discussion and a lot of memes and a lot of themes of what they go through, what they talk about is about how this country it was created by white Europeans, right? By white people. The country was conquered by white people, and we're not going to give it up. And if you're that guy, if you and this is coming from Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is the brainchild for this whole policy. There's a lot of this in the Project 2025 document, right? And it's about turning this country into a white country. These are people who would take the right to vote away from women because women tend to be more empathetic. They would outlaw interracial marriage again, right? They would outlaw gay marriage again. And a lot of this is about what they see about stopping a social change they see, which is that the country is becoming less white in the sense that it's less black too, because it's becoming browner.
Right.
So this mixing of cultures and races or ethnicities, races These are all loaded terms because all of
Right.
this is socially constructed.
Right.
All of
And
this is just a social idea.
I think it goes deeper than race and ethnicity and languages. Some of the darkest parts of American history, uh, show uh, how the majority rejects or others people that are different than them. Uh,
Hmm.
in the 1830s, 1840s, it was the Irish. Irish need not
Yeah.
apply. No Irish served here. I
Right.
today everyone thinks of Irish people as being white.
Right.
But back then they were different than the people that were already here, and that was what targeted them, is that
Right.
they were different.
Yep.
And my ancestors,
Italians, same thing for Italians.
right, later on for Italians, and then for
Right.
Jews, other immigrant groups that now we tend to think of as being white people,
Right.
and those differences that made them stick out, made them other in the past, have kind of gone away. They've been assimilated. But my ancestors were persecuted for their faith. They had a
Hmm.
different Christian take on Christianity than the people in the communities where they lived. And
Right.
they were punished for that, and they were murdered for that, and they were driven across the country to settle in the West because of those beliefs. They're as white can be, and
Right.
ironically, a lot of them today, the descendants fall into the sort of the right wing group. But
Yeah.
I think there's this othering that happens in every society. I mean, you look at Rwanda, you got the Hutus and the Tutsis. They just were different tribal groups. They
Yeah.
worked together, lived together, probably had the same religion, spoke the same language. They had some trait that set them apart from the others, so that was excuse enough to kill them.
Yeah.
And I
But
think that it's the darker side of human nature. And one of the things I've always revered about our country, about the United States and our great American experiment, is that the whole design, the whole intent was to overcome those brutish, naturalistic,
yeah.
natural man attributes and to aspire to something greater. But uh, that's what breaks my heart as we see what's going on now. It's it's as if, as a nation, we are giving up our inherent optimism that has made America the great country that it is, falling
Mm.
short of our aspirations and our ideals,
Right.
but still striving to get there.
And just to circle back to your original sort of thought here, is where are all these people coming from who are willing to do this? And we know that ICE has hired a bunch of the people who were part of the January 6th riot at the Capitol. We know they've hired a bunch of Proud Boys, but I think more generally speaking, if you go to any high school today or any middle school today, 10% of the kids, and I don't know if it's more boys than girls anymore. When I was a kid, it was more boys, but maybe the girls just bully each other. So I didn't have a girl bully, but the 10%, 10, 15% of these kids are bullies. And,
Right.
and they're growing up with that, and if it works in their particular case, they never stop being a bully. I once got really a lot of pushback once when I was I was on some kind of social media, and they were talking about this. The one of the kids that was one of the school shooters, right? So this kid shows up at a school, and these are bullies, right? Or they're kids that are bullied,
Mhm.
right? But this kid was basically a bully, and he threw an orange at a girl in the lunchroom, right, from behind, hit her in the back
Uh-huh.
of the head or the back, right, and he suffers no repercussions from that. And I whatever Facebook post or Twitter, whatever it was, I said, when I was 16 years old, if you did that to one of my friends, me and my buddies would have taken you out behind the the football stadium stands and explained things to you,
Right.
right? And I and now and everyone hit me hard. No violence is always bad. It's never bad.
Right.
I mean, it's never good. Violence just makes more violence. And I'm like, maybe that's one of our problems is we're not
it
teaching these kids that when they're young that bullying is not good. But the general point is, I think there's just a growing number of young people and people in general who are just natural bullies, and it doesn't help that one of the things Trump has done and his sort of project has done is made it okay to be a racist again,
or to
right?
be a
Because
bully. I mean, he's the bully in chief.
right,
Everything he does, everything he says, he does with some belligerence and bullying and effort at intimidating. When I was a kid, I was always picked on. I was skinny, scrawny, and I used to get picked on all the time. And
yeah,
because my dad was in the military, we moved around a lot, so I got to be the victim multiple times. It seems like every
yeah,
year, if you're in a different place, you got to go through it all again.
right,
But I
exactly. That
learned
hazing.
fairly quickly that the way to stop a bully is as soon as they bully you, you punch them in the nose,
Right.
literally and figuratively. You don't
Yep.
say, I'm going to punch you in the nose. You just do it.
Just do it. Yep.
And it's a scary thing to do. And sometimes you get beat, you get beat back as well, but you never get bullied again. And
Right.
it's a message to others who might bully you.
When I was in the fourth grade, I think, third or fourth grade, uh, my dad comes to me like, why don't you want to go to school? Because I'm like pretending I'm sick because I didn't want to go to school because there
Uh-huh.
was this bully, right? And I was certainly very willing to fight back against the kid, but there were rules against fighting, and I didn't want to get
Right.
in trouble,
Right.
right? So I told my dad what was going on. He said, "Son, you go to school. If he messes with you, explain it to him, right? And if you get in trouble, I'll come down and explain it to the teacher." So
Uh-huh.
I did. Never got bullied again. Not in that
Right.
year, anyway.
Right.
Right? Until you had a new set of bullies
You're right. The new
next year.
kids, and you got to relearn them, all those things.
You got to reteach them all over again, right?
Yep. All
So,
over again.
but I think that we one of the things we want to mention before we shift gears here is the the we talked about pulling people out of line for citizenship, and this is coming from the people who complain like, well, we don't mind immigration as long as they go through the process. And these people are going through the process and they're still being told no at the very, very last minute.
Right.
But maybe even more important, because that's a new thing, and we'll have to see if that continues, if they keep doing that. But the thing that's more important is this ongoing brown shirt like intimidation of people on the street, right? Pulling people out of their cars without respect to who they are or whether they might be a citizen. When I did the interview down in Williamsburg at the ICE event, one of the things I told them was, I if they came and asked me right now, prove you're a citizen, I couldn't do it. I don't carry a passport around. So these people are doing this. It's unconstitutional the way they're doing this because they don't have any warrants. They have no probable cause of any kind except the color of someone's skin or the way they talk. And this is going to get a lot of American citizens taken into custody unnecessarily and illegally. And we need to stop it. But the good news is it looks like Americans in general are put off about this. Even a lot of the people who want something done about immigration are pissed off about this because they
Right.
don't like the way they're doing it. Right.
Right. Several times over our podcast, we've talked about the fact that those of us who have had concerns about our democracy and our institutions, it's always kind of hypothetical, and in the future,
Yeah.
we're going to be at risk. And I think this conversation, again, is one in a long line of conversations where it's really obvious that those fears or concerns about democracy or our institutions, it's not hypothetical and it's not in the future, it's now. And we're
Right.
seeing it. And Americans individually, not collectively, but individually, need to decide what are they going to do about it.
Right.
Are they going to join in? Some of them will. Some of them have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are they going to just watch and observe and go into denial, or just be too afraid to do anything? That's probably the majority of Americans. Uh, but who's going to stand up? Who's going to say no?
Well, a
Who's going
couple
to
of old
fight the fight?
combat veterans with a microphone, maybe.
Well, that's two of us, but we're easily outnumbered.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Well, and I share your sort of reluctance to raise sort of compare what we're going through now with what happened in 1930s Germany. But it's very clear that there are a lot of parallels, and this is one of them, because one of the ways the Nazis came to power when very early in their political party formation was literally gangs of thugs that put on a brown shirt and would go to political rallies held by other parties and beat people up. Right. So it was very much an intimidation thing. And this isn't exactly the same because they're not showing up at Democratic Party meetings yet, but it looks a lot like the same kind of intimidation tactic aimed at other people that qualify as other. They're not the right religion. They're not the right color of skin. They don't speak the right language. They eat the wrong foods. And it wasn't so long ago that this was targeted at Catholics, and now, interestingly, Catholics are a big part of what's going on because a lot of this is a white Christian reactionary movement against social change that has, over the last 20 or 30 years, made them and their concerns about what society looks like a lot less relevant, and
Right.
they're annoyed by that that irrelevance. They're scared by it. A lot of this is just fear, and that's the nature of this beast: is you fear things you don't understand or know. And what we do know is once people get to know others that are people that are different, those rifts tend to smooth out a little bit, right? Oh, okay. Well, that chicken curry is actually pretty good, right?
Right.
So, you know, so I don't know if we've gone a real over 30 minutes, so we can shift gears here. But any final thoughts on the folks? This is not the last time we're going to talk about this. This is a big issue, and we'll come back to this because it's an ongoing thing. It's changing daily. The whole pulling people out of the citizenship oath line is brand new. Just happened this week. So this is all going to come up again. So Scott.
Since we made some references back to the 1930s and 1940s, when I was a younger man in the 1970s, I lived in France for several years, and I learned a lot about the French resistance and how there were a sizable percentage of the population who stood up and resisted. And they're revered as heroes today, still in France. Many of those people were still alive, and I met many of them when I was living there. But the reason I bring this up is I think the term resist and versus comply versus being apathetic is an important verb for us to consider. Is how to resist, how each of us can resist these trends, these tendencies in different ways. But I think it's really the obligation of all of us to resist the inertia of the cruelty and meanness and bullying that we see going on in our society today.
Right.
And then on that, I'll stop being negative, Debbie Downer here.
Well, I
Let's talk
don't
about
challenge
football.
I don't challenge anyone's opinion that a white Christian ethno state is the best way for the United States to go. If that's the way you feel, then work to convince the rest of us that that's a good idea and get it done at the ballot box and not by sending armed federal agents out to intimidate people.
Yeah.
But
So
now let's we can be downer about football too, the way that's going.
Yeah. So what do you think about this college bowl championship stuff?
Well, I've been watching college football a long time, and those of you who have seen some of the other podcasts, and you can check back through the content and see me talk about gambling and sports betting, especially. I've been doing that a long time, right? Watching football, and betting on it. And, this really, I think part of the problem is there's so much money in the sport now, and some of that money's from gambling. But with the TV contracts and all that, there's just so much money. And I think the playoff thing is just another way to make more money for media companies, for the people who administer college football, for the universities, right? And I think it's a good thing that the players now are getting paid. But all of this is really they're professionalizing what used to be a very amateur sport.
Right.
Okay, and
And and I don't have a problem with that trend. I think it's
no,
been a long time coming, and it's a great form of entertainment
yeah,
for many Americans. Although it's violent and it's sort of gladiator like in a way, but maybe that satisfies that urge that we all have. But this whole who gets to play in the playoffs, who gets to be national champion, who even gets a shot. Um, Seems like it's a rigged game, uh, so to speak. Uh,
well, that's because it is.
yeah,
It seems like it's rigged because it is rigged, and there's a couple of ways it's rigged. One is that the universities now depend on donor money to pay the players,
hmm
right? Largely speaking. So if you have a big donor, if Alabama has bigger donors than Louisville, then they're going to get more NIL money, and they're going to have a better chance of getting better players and having a better team than a school like Louisville or James Madison or UVA. Now, UVA is an example of this because they got a big anonymous donation of $30 million to their football program, and suddenly they were right on the cusp of being in the championship game,
right,
in the playoffs. And they would have, if they had beaten Duke, they would be in the playoffs.
right,
Um, so that's one way it's rigged. Is it's whoever can buy it gets it.
uh,
And okay, that's fundamentally, I get that. That's I don't think that's the best way to go about it, but okay. The second way it's rigged is that the decision about who goes in that playoff is an opinion. It's made by a committee that is basically expressing an opinion. It's not one on the field. If you look at the NFL playoffs, it's very common. Every year, there's a team that won their division barely 500. Right? They barely won more than half their games, but they're in the playoffs because they're won their division. And there's another team that didn't make the wild card cut and didn't win their division. They won 3 more games, but they're not in the playoffs, and that's because it's all won on the field. So everybody accepts that, right?
right,
So, but college football, it's all opinion, and they've tried to fix that a little bit by, applying some. Well, if you win your conference championship, that increases your chances, even if you have a few losses.
yeah,
But there's some upsides to this because if you're in the elite of the college football world, one loss doesn't end it for you. It doesn't mean your season's over.
right. Well, in some
2
cases, three
probably does,
losses
and 3
doesn't
certainly
either.
does. What's
Yeah,
that?
in some cases, three losses
Yeah.
doesn't eliminate you. Just ask Alabama about that.
Right.
But
Right. Right.
it, I'm not going to pretend to be objective about some of my feelings about the selection process, because my son and I went to Dallas this last weekend to watch the Big 12 championship game, because the team I've cheered for over 50 years
Yeah.
was playing for the conference championship against what I think is probably the best team in college football today, Texas
Yeah.
Tech.
Yeah.
So BYU and Texas Tech beat each other up on the field 2 times this year. Texas Tech bested BYU, but that's the only losses that BYU had.
Right.
And BYU is a good team and arguably worthy of playing in the championship tournament. But it didn't turn out that way, and for a lot of reasons. But it wasn't just BYU that kind of got snubbed by the selection committee. I mean, we have a team like JMU, James Madison, a local team here, who, congratulations to them, made it in the tournament because they won their conference. But they're not of the same caliber as Oregon, and we'll see that the next week or in a couple of weeks when they play. And they're not the same caliber as Notre Dame, who didn't get in.
Right.
And when other
Scott,
teams that lost on Saturday did get in, Alabama, it's kind of like they got this entitlement ticket that doesn't matter what their season is, they're always going to be in the hunt.
There are at least 3 teams in the ACC alone that are better than JMU.
Right. And you got
that are not going to the playoff.
You got
and
Miami.
I'm talking about Virginia, SMU, right? Even maybe Louisville. We beat them on the field. It was early in the season, but and one of the things that you have to think about here is that a team that loses a game early in the year can improve quite a bit. So we're not, none of these teams are the same team they were 4 months ago in August. And Louisville's an example of that because injuries have made them a far worse team than they were when the season started, right? But sometimes these teams get better over the course of the season. And I think that's, one of the things Notre Dame got left out for 2 reasons. One is I think the committee just wanted at least one ACC team in. They couldn't put Duke in because they had 5 losses and they weren't as highly ranked as JMU or Tulane, right? But Miami beat Notre Dame on the field, but it was like the first game of the season.
Yeah,
it's second game of the season. Yeah. Right. So is that really meaningful? And I think, both of those sound like good ideas, but what I guess you have to ask yourself, what's the goal here? Is the goal, if the goal is to put the 12 best college football teams in a playoff and seed them somehow, then don't worry about conference championships and just do that. The NCAA does this with basketball, and it's worked very well for years, right?
Right.
Right.
I guess, the biggest criticism that many of us have of the selection process is that it doesn't seem fair or objective.
Well, it's because it's not. Yeah, right.
Right. But it pretends to be.
Right. Yeah.
And
they talk about computer metrics and FPI and all that. Right.
Right. And it's different from the pros. And you made a good point when the conference champion with a poor record and not a very strong team, makes it to the playoffs. But there's a finite set of NFL teams that are competing. It's a smaller set, and they're playing the same teams over and over. Everybody their schedules are balanced as much as their schedules could be balanced. But in college football, you got teams like you got some. I'm not going to name names, but you got some teams that will play patsies. Someone who doesn't have a snowflake's chance in hell of beating them on the field, they'll play several of those teams in a year to pad their record. And other teams don't. Other teams have a much more difficult schedule. Anyway, I don't know what the answer is.
Your point about scheduling is a good one. And one of the things a lot of people don't know about the NFL is that the good teams play the good teams. So the Super Bowl champion from last year has a more difficult schedule this year than the team that finished last place in the AFC North. Okay. Because they're playing like teams, and that's by design. And the idea is to create some kind of parity and not leave it up to luck, right? So that the undefeated Miami Dolphins from 1972 show up in 1973, and it just so happens that all the teams they play are bad, so they go undefeated again. The idea is to keep that from happening and to give all these franchises a chance to win. Now, the NFL, there are owners who just don't care about winning. They don't want to spend the money on it. They just want to sell hot dogs and $20 beers and make money on the deal, right? And so that's an issue in the NFL. In college, the scheduling thing that you mentioned is also important. Now, I think one of the things that the playoff has done has created an incentive for schools to stop doing what you're talking about, right? Playing I joke about being in Arkansas, we always played Southwest Louisiana Teachers College or something, right?
Uh-huh.
Back in the 60s and 70s. And I joke about that. It's always what we call the directional schools, right? Southwest Arkansas, Northeast
Right.
Texas, kind of stuff, right? Decent football teams, but they're not at the elite level, and they're playing for a payday, and that's how these schools get money to keep a program
Right.
is by playing the Arkansas and the Texases of the world and taking an $800,000 payoff home so they can get new weight machines in the gym, right?
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that, and I think the incentive today is for these teams to play as tough a schedule as possible. I think one of the problems is, and this is what happened in the ACC this year, is that the conferences are so big that the teams can't play all the other teams,
Right.
right? Because if you've got 18 teams in the conference, one team can't play every other team. That would be 17 games. And they want to play other teams because everyone wants to play Florida teams because that's a recruiting hotbed, and they want to show up there, right, and try to recruit there.
And a lot of
But
traditional rivalries are not in the same conference.
Right, USC and Notre Dame is a great example, right?
Right.
So is BYU a big rival with Boise State? It would strike me they might be.
No, no.
No,
Boise State might think they are, but
Roger, I got you. Well, we played Boise State once in a bowl game, and beat the crap out of them. So
yeah,
the blue field, it didn't help them that day. But
yeah,
I think one of the things is these conferences are so big that the teams can't play everybody, so they have to have these crazy tiebreakers, and that's how Duke and UVA got in the ACC championship game. UVA belonged there, right? They played their way into that, but Duke not so much. And either Miami or SMU, maybe even Georgia Tech, all three of those teams were better than Duke, and should have been in that championship game ahead of Duke at least. And I predict you'll see some changes to that tiebreaker. And another thing they could do is split these things into divisions like they used to.
yeah.
But I don't know how do you think this is going to go? Because this is changing every year. These rules change every year.
Yeah.
Right?
So on a positive note, on a continuous improvement note, one of the good things that's going on is every year they go back and review what happened, and they try to tweak things going forward,
Yep.
with the intent of making it better or
Right.
solving whatever problems that they had this last time.
Making
So
Notre Dame
process wise, that's a good thing. Substantively, do they end up with better solutions? I don't know, but there's some interesting things this year that they haven't encountered before. And I'm curious as to what the impact is going to be of Notre Dame refusing to play any bowl game,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
giving the big middle finger to the NCAA because they weren't selected to play in the championship tournament. Now, you could criticize Notre Dame for being unsportsman and blah 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 and all that stuff, taking their marbles and going home, and you can also criticize the NCAA for the decisions they made. But so one side's not right or wrong, but how are they going to handle that? And there's a couple of other teams that have lost their coaches and lost many of their key players because of recruitment, the portal for players, and then the merry-go-round for coaches, successful coaches that happens, and the timing that happens. So Kansas State and Iowa State, two other Big 12 teams, are not going to. They refuse to go to any bowl games because they lost their coaches.
Yeah.
And most of the coaching staff is following the head coach.
Yeah.
And many of the players, when they saw that the coaches were leaving, they went into the portal, and they're not really available anymore. Yeah. So these other problems are going on here at the same time. It's hard not to say that the NCAA and the whole championship thing is a mess, but there's a lot of messy parts to it.
One of the messiest is the part where Lane Kiffin left Ole Miss to take the job at LSU,
Yeah, perfect example.
a rival, and and Ole Miss is in the playoff, and Ole Miss is a very good football team, and they have an excellent chance of winning the whole thing. So it's very interesting that this coach took basically left that situation to take a new job, and the university said, "Well, you're not coaching this team in these playoffs if you're going to just leave. We're not going to let you advertise because then he'd be on TV the entire playoff with the announcers talking about about him going to LSU and touting the LSU program.
Right.
And University of Mississippi doesn't want to see that.
Right.
So I expect you'll see some changes. I think you'll see some changes with respect to the way coaches move. In other words, I predict a restriction on changing jobs before the playoffs are over, right? I predict you'll see a change in the way the portal is done, right? Interestingly, when some of these coaches, Nick Saban defended Lane Kiffin, and in defending Lane Kiffin, he criticized players because players aren't loyal. Now, how does that work? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if the coaches can't be loyal, how are the players going to be loyal?
Yeah. Well,
Why
we
should
don't
they
need
bother?
to bring up. We don't need to bring up Nick Saban because that's a whole
the devil of
other
college football.
universe of controversy and contradictions.
Well, the larger point is how. I mean, I can think of a lot of ways to make this better. Basically, the portal doesn't open until after the playoffs are done and after all the bowl games are done. Right? No coach can switch jobs until after all that's finished. The season has to be over before they can switch jobs. Right? They can talk about it, and they would. I mean, I can't keep you from having a phone call with somebody. But
yeah, the problem is there's not really a governing body of NCAA football. We call it NCAA football, or we used to, but nobody's really in charge. The conferences have their own rules; they do their own thing. Universities within conferences do their own things. There's no central authority to enforce any rules. I think organizationally, the whole thing needs to change.
There is a group, the old Bowl Championship Series group, and the whatever group runs this committee that decides on the playoff teams. That's an organization that could stand up and do this. And one of the things you might see some antitrust exemption legislation in Congress that could have an effect on all this. But my prediction long term, I think you're going to see some short term rule changes. Someone will have to step up and administer all this. The NCAA is not my favorite candidate for that, but they're already in place and doing some similar stuff for basketball. So maybe that can be the organization. But my prediction in the longer term, I think short term, you're going to see some changes in the rules with respect to the portal and coaching changes. But in the longer term, I expect college football to look a lot more like the NFL in the sense that it'll be more organized into set leagues with a set number of teams, right? And maybe 6 conferences with 16 teams each. Each of them has 8 teams in the division. You play 7 teams in your division and 2 teams in the other division every year. And then the winners of the divisions play in the championship, and those 6 get automatic bids. And then another 6 get taken as wild cards or, whatever you want to call it. A lot more like the NFL. That's what this is going to look like in 5 years, in my mind.
So
right?
Not like the basketball tournament where there's 64 teams.
No, because you can't play a football game every 2 days.
Right.
Right. I mean, these teams can play 2 basketball games in a week.
You start the tournament in November. Yeah. So it's interesting. And it's funny in some ways, as we're talking about this, we're dissatisfied with what's going on with our government and our institutions. And we're dissatisfied and complaining and bitching about what's going on in college football. And, to a certain extent, it just shows that we're old soldiers because we have to bitch about everything.
Right.
And as a leader, that if your troops aren't bitching, then you're doing something wrong.
That's right. If they're not complaining, something that it's like when you suddenly don't hear the 2-year-old in their room,
Right.
you might want to go check on them when they get quiet, right? 'Cause if they're not complaining, it means you're not doing anything. But yeah, and this, and the college football thing, it's entertainment, but it's important because it affects a lot of people's lives, right?
Right.
There's a lot of people have jobs and their livelihoods depend on it. In the media, the players, a lot of these players come from poor families, and there are places in Virginia that are very highly recruited because they train very good football players who come out of very poor families, and they have a lot of incentive to make money playing football,
Right.
right? Even if it damages their bodies. So it's not like this is unimportant, and there's billions of dollars in this.
Right.
So a lot of people are becoming very wealthy on college football on the backs of these kids. And for years, the kids weren't even getting paid, and they ended up losing their scholarship if they got injured and didn't have health care to cover it.
Right.
So things have improved quite a bit for the players. That's a good thing, but it's also bad when it can't be done in some kind of fair way. But like you said, it looks like they're working. They tweak it every year a little bit to try to make it a little better. And the cynic in me says that's just because that makes more money for them, and it probably does. But it also makes it look better. They're trying to create a good product, a good entertainment product, and good for them. I like to watch it. Occasionally, I'll even bet on it. But it's something to talk about. There's a lot of people out there talking about making a living talking about sports,
And
and
there's
so
some value, just entertainment value, social currency value to having
right.
something like this that we can talk about. It's a common
Uh,
language
you know,
across socioeconomic, geographic, racial, ethnic groups. That it's a common thing, which we used to have a
how
lot
often do
more
you
of.
get
But
60,000 people in one place who all agree with each other on something?
well, yeah, well, I think there were 60,000 Texas Tech fans at Cowboy Stadium and
Yeah, that's because it
20,000
was in.
BYU fans. So I don't. So the
I go
60,000
to
they were agreeing, but not all 100, all 80,000 that were there. So
I go watch Louisville when they play at UVA or at Tech, right? And I was very happy when they joined the ACC because now there's like 4 or 5 stadiums within 2 or 3 hours of my house where I can go watch them play, and it's fun to go to a game live. I don't do it very often, but it's fun and interesting. And but it is interesting being that Louisville guy in the red shirt in a sea of UVA brown, blue, and orange.
yeah,
But so I get your feeling there. But we're already up over an hour, so I guess we ought to wind this up. Even though we could sit and talk into these microphones all day long. But important stuff, folks. The immigration thing, you'll see more from us on this because it's an important thing, and it's not a good trend. What we're seeing the government do, you have federal agents basically intimidating people on the street, snatching people off the street without any kind of probable cause or warrants, and this is unconstitutional. And we need to think of what we want to do to push back. And then, the football thing is just fun to talk about. It's fun to go to a game and talk about, and it's very important to a lot of people. But guy across the street from me has an Ohio State flag flying, and that joker's up all the time, right? It's up all the time. Rain, snow, doesn't matter. It's up.
yeah.
So
There's two teams I dislike, and I probably never like. One of them's Ohio State, and
yeah,
the other one's Alabama.
I've never been a fan of either one of those. I grew up in Arkansas, lived in Mississippi for a long time. So the Razorbacks and the Rebels, I wish they changed that name, but oh well. Ole Miss and Arkansas, follow them. Now, of course, Louisville, where I got my degrees. So I get the fandom, and it's great. It's good entertainment. It's good to chat over a beer, watch with your buddies and all that. It's fun stuff, and we need some fun stuff these days, don't we?
We need to lighten things up sometimes in our lives.
All right, folks. Well, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, let us know what you think. Send us a note. You can find us at www.foggybottomline.com. We're on Patreon, on YouTube at Foggy Bottom Line Media, and we're on other social media, TikTok and Instagram at Foggy Bottom Line. We've got some plans for next year to roll out some new stuff. So keep an eye out and enjoy your holidays. Have a good weekend. We're taping this on the 10th, Wednesday morning, about 11 o'clock. So you can expect to see this it's Thursday when you see this. It'll be Thursday morning, early Thursday afternoon when this is published. So trying to keep it a little bit fresh anyway, but a lot more to come. We've got a lot of great ideas on what we're going to start up with next year. So stay tuned, like us, subscribe, and don't forget to take a look next week for what probably could be, well, it won't be our final episode for 2025, but the holidays are coming up, so we'll figure out what we're going to do with that schedule. So Scott, any final words?
No, it's always fun, Stan, to talk about things. I wish that we had more power to solve all these problems that we talk about, but I think it's important for us to identify and share the insights and perspectives that a couple of old farts, a couple old soldiers have.
Right, and my hope is that somewhere out there's a couple of 30-somethings who are getting some ideas on what to do about all this stuff. Because this is going to have to be driven by young people, right?
Right. We got to pass that baton. Yeah.
You got to pass that baton. But we're not going to stop talking about stuff. So stay tuned. Come back. It's always a pleasure to sit and chat with you, Scott. And it's always a pleasure to interact with our audience. So send us a comment, send us a note. Let us know what you think, because we do care. We want to make this better. We want to make this a product that you folks enjoy. Okay, that's doing something for you, that's giving you some information you didn't already have. We want to be teaching you folks about this stuff as well. So I guess that's it for today. Scott, take care. Have a good Wednesday afternoon.
Wait, one last thing. Go Army, beat Navy.
Go Army, beat Navy. I've got an Army buddy and a Navy buddy who I helped both of them do a campaign. And it's kind of interesting to get in a room and watch them when they're watching that game together. Yeah. My experience was at the TOC, the Tactical Operations Center in Tuzla. I was deployed over the wintertime, and we had it up on this big, giant tactical screen in the Tactical Operations Center in the Tuzla, Maine, which was the main Army headquarters, military headquarters in Bosnia when I was deployed there. And of course, you didn't have a lot of Navy guys in there, so it was mostly an Army crowd. But boy, those generals, they get crazy when the Army's playing. When Army's playing, Navy, they go nuts. It was cool to watch. So go Army, beat Navy, and take care, everybody. Have a great week, great weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Scott, take care of yourself, sir.
Carry on.
This is Stan Scott with Foggy Bottom Line Media. Out here.